For panoramic pictures, it's really quite simple. There are really just a couple things you need to remember, and that is one, with panoramic images, what you need to do, you're taking a series of images, and the exposure needs to be consistent throughout the entire series. This camera does not have a Panorama Stitch mode, so what you need to do is set the manual mode to lock that exposure. The way I know what the exposure should be set to is very simple. In the program mode, if I press my shutter button halfway, I'll get the values for my aperture and shutter speed. And in this case, because my aperture is 2.8, and that's a little bit wide for a landscape, what I want to do is set this a little bit smaller so the entire landscape will be in focus. I'll just release the button, and using my quick menu joystick, I'll go down, decreasing the size of the aperture. 7.1 is just fine. That's still, in my case, 1/80, which I can hand hold. And now I know that with an aperture of 7.1 or 8, I can choose 1/60 or 1/80, and I should be just fine. So I'll move my mode dial to the manual mode. And right now I'm looking at the shutter speed, so I'll increase that to 1/80. And then I'll go to the left to change my aperture to 7.1. Now when I press my shutter button halfway, the meter comes up, and you can see that the camera indicates I am properly exposed. So this is great. I don't want to use the flash. Assuming we're outdoors and not taking a picture of a room, then the flash is not going to do anything. And even if we were indoors, I wouldn't want to use the flash because really when you stitch these pictures together, it's not going to provide for very consistent lighting. So don't use the flash. Start on one end of your picture. Take the shot. Remember what is on the left or right hand side of the frame, and then move that towards the center of the frame. You want to overlap about 50% of the picture. So once you have your second picture, you can press it again. My settings stay consistent, so I know my exposure is going to be consistent, and take another shot. And you can keep panning across the landscape, taking as many pictures as you want, overlapping about half the picture over the previous picture. Finally, before I let you go taking pictures of panoramas, I just want to give you one last tip, and that is locking the manual focus. This can also be very, very important, and it depends on the distance of your subject from the camera. Even if your focus would be set to infinity, it may be important to lock the focus manually and keep that consistent as well, just like with the exposure. With autofocus cameras, I've run into the situation where I focus in one place, and then my next picture, the focus will be very different, and the stitch won't come out very nice. So, locking the manual focus is very simple. Press the shutter button halfway, and then after you've locked that focus, move your focusing switch down to MF for manual focus. Now when I release, the manual focus just locked at the same distance from the subject as the autofocus had locked. So now I'm totally ready with my manual focus locked, my exposure locked, and I can take my series of images. To find out much more about digital photography and your digital camera, go to lbguides.com.